Written by Anhundred. I keep having the same dream. Most nights are just a welcoming blanket of darkness and nothing. But about once a week I have the dream. Objectively, it's not a scary nightmare. There's no one chasing me. I'm not falling endlessly or riding a bus with no pants on. But every time I wake up, I'm sobbing uncontrollably, and it takes half an hour for my wife hugging me and stroking my hair for me to return to my senses. In the dream, I always begin on the ground. I'm lying on dusty concrete in the middle of a road, and when I drag myself to my feet, my bones ache with weariness. I am always next to an open manhole cover, as if I had dragged myself up from the underground and then collapsed with the effort. In the dream, I am always in the same city. It is not one I recognize. It might not even be a real city. It has generic tall skyscrapers, their surfaces slate gray and unforgiving. There are no parks or sculptures, no landmarks to show me where I am. The buildings don't have any doors, and the windows aren't made of glass. They're simply lines drawn on the building's surface. For all I know, the buildings might not even be hollow. They might be enormous slabs of solid rock towering over me. I wander aimlessly through the empty streets. There isn't a single car in sight. No bikes, no buses, no people. The only sound is my footsteps and a slight whistle as the wind whips through the silent buildings, jutting out of the ground like tombstones. That is, until I start screaming. I've never been able to lucid dream. That is, controlling what you do and where you go when you're dreaming. I am simply swept away from one place to the next, never having a say in what happens. That's why, even though I've been through the same dream countless times, and I know that there's no one to answer me, I always start screaming for someone, anyone, to find me. My cries echo off the buildings, irregularly enough for the spark of hope to build that what I'm hearing is actually someone answering me. But no one ever comes. I am lost, alone in a false, empty city where the buildings loom ominously and my screams fade into nothingness. And then, without fail, I wake up sobbing into the arms of my ever-patient wife. But now the dreams are changing. The first change happened 2 weeks ago. Everything seemed normal in the beginning. I woke up next to the manhole, wandered around between the desolate buildings, and eventually started screaming myself hoarse. But then, just as I felt my mind being dragged back to wakefulness, I saw motion out of the corner of my eye and turned towards it. In my last split second of dreaming, I saw a darkened hand reach around the corner of a nearby building, placing itself ever so gently on my left shoulder. When I woke up, I mentioned the dream hand to my wife, and then later to my therapist, who saw it as a good sign. She told me that in cases of recurring dreams like this, change is good. It's often a sign that the dream is working towards the end of its course, and it will soon be over and behind me. What I didn't mention was the hand-shaped burn mark I had found on my shoulder when I got dressed. It was painless, completely healed, and only slightly textured to the touch. I stared at it in the mirror for a few minutes, then decisively put on a long-sleeved shirt. I didn't want to think about it. I wanted to be happy about the possibility of the dreams coming to an end. I didn't want to have to deal with the physical consequences of the nightmare. I was eager to be free from the endless wandering of darkened buildings. At least, I was until a few days ago, when the dream changed again. This time, as soon as I opened my eyes next to the manhole cover, I knew something was wrong. The sky, which had always been featureless and blank, was now dark, as if a storm was brewing. The light source seemed to be impossible to place, as if the light was coming from somewhere other than the sun entirely. Shadows didn't lie where I thought they should, and no matter how many corners I turned, there was nowhere brighter than anywhere else. And then there were the hands. Identical to the darkened hand I had seen in the split second before waking. A multitude of them seemed to be beckoning, waving, and climbing wherever I looked. None of them were attached to bodies. They all seemed to originate out of sight, behind corners, under grates in the street, out of windows that I thought were non-existent. My screaming started earlier that night, and the handprints became hard to hide under sleeves. But as bad as all this has gotten, nothing has ever terrified me quite like the dream I had last night. The burned handprints cover my entire body now. I feel like I'm more scar than skin. I haven't been able to see my therapist, and even my wife has been avoiding me since she woke up with my stiff and charred body still smoking in her arms. If this keeps getting worse, if the dream is indeed working its course, I fear I might not live to see the end of the cycle. Last night's dream began the same way they all did. Cement, manhole cover, buildings. But now the hands were everywhere. A rolling carpet of limbs climbing up the walls and twitching in the breeze. I could barely walk. The hands grasped at my legs, clawing through my hair, trying to pull me down within their grasp. I waded through a sea of arms, desperately trying to find anywhere that I could to break free from their reach. When I nearly fell over from panic, when the clawing fingers had found their way into my mouth and nostrils, I finally saw it. An open plaza I had never seen before, free of those shifting arms that originated from the buildings around me. I fought towards the plaza, wrenching myself free of the fingers that dug their way into my skin with a clammy ferocity. Stumbling into the open air, I felt the last of the hands tear away from my body, and I began screaming in relief. I collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily, and saw teardrops splashing onto the ground through my blurred vision. But some of the drops were landing too far away to have come from my dripping eyes. And with a wrench in my gut, I felt the winds change, the air charged with a storm. Slowly looking up, my entire body froze as I saw what was a building in the distance. An enormous wave was steadily growing and churning its way towards the city, the water as dark and oily as the swirling sky. Within the towering wave, I saw tangling shapes reaching and grasping as the water surged forwards. Taller than any of the skyscrapers now, I could hear the roar of the wave over the pounding in my ears. Nothing had ever been so large, so unforgiving, and so completely and utterly unstoppable. I could see now that the dark, swirling shapes were more arms, reaching and clutching desperately to latch onto me and drag me beneath the water. I closed my eyes and waited, trembling for the unfathomable wave to crash over me, and finally, finally allow me to wake.